Breaking news: Zelenskyy must decide what to do as Western support for Ukraine wanes. During his speech to the Conservative Party conference, Rishi Sunak assured the Ukrainian people that the United Kingdom would not abandon them. U.S. support will last as long as it takes, Joe Biden added. Despite the rhetoric, public opinion is shifting away from the conflict, and democratic elections will undoubtedly have an effect on Western support. When all is said and done, will Vladimir Putin's aggression be rewarded, spelling the end of Ukraine? Military aid from the West is essential for Ukraine, both practically and morally. However, the West's ability and enthusiasm to maintain current levels of military aid are growing under pressure as the war drags towards its second anniversary. How long will Volodymyr Zelenskyy continue to receive vital military equipment, ammunition, and financial aid despite the consistent and lavish political support from the West? Although Westerners continue to feel compassion for Ukraine's plight, tough decisions must be made in the post-pandemic era due to rising energy prices and other living expenses. Evidence suggests that public opinion is drifting inexorably towards domestic priorities, and continued support for Ukraine has impacted the economies of Western nations. Advertisement. A pro-Kremlin leader was recently elected as Prime Minister of NATO member Slovakia on the promise that his government would end its support for Ukraine. Furthermore, this is not an isolated incident. Tensions have been rising between Poland and Ukraine as the country prepares for crucial elections of its own. Western war fatigue is growing as a result of upcoming elections in the United States and the United Kingdom, as well as a recent U.S. poll showing that most Americans do not support continued aid to Ukraine. While the West has accomplished its primary goal, can a prolonged war still be justified? Is it possible to free all of Russian-occupied Ukraine, even though President Zelenskyy remains, understandably, committed to doing so? The West has supplied an abundance of military hardware and services this year, including weapons, ammunition, training, and funding. For months into their spring offensive, the Ukrainian military has seen relatively little movement on the battlefield despite heavy casualties on both sides. Would continued Western military support simply lead to a protracted, costly, and largely static conflict if Ukraine was unable to make progress this summer, when arguably it was as well prepared as it could ever be? Does that make sense? To prevent Russian aggression that could spread to the rest of Europe, the West has been backing Ukraine, which is not a member of NATO. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has severely hampered the country's military strength. With the loss of over 2,000 of its finest tanks, Russia is unlikely to pose a military threat to Europe for at least another decade. The Western world has accomplished its primary goal: arms exports cannot be maintained indefinitely. But even if public support could be maintained, the supply of weapons would eventually run out. For the past year, Western military aid to Ukraine has primarily consisted of high-tech weapons that allow for precision strike at range, with low collateral damage. However, due to their high cost, modern weapons are only made in small quantities, and the factory doors are locked once they are acquired. Therefore, supplies can't be quickly renewed. It is possible to reduce national stockpiles, but only at the expense of increasing risks to national security, which cannot be sustained indefinitely. The head of NATO's military committee has issued a dire warning that the West's depleted supply of weapons is unlikely to be restocked anytime soon. There is dwindling public support in the West for the war, and supplies of weapons are running low. The signs are clearly visible. It is ultimately up to President Zelenskyy to decide what happens next, but it is clear that a compromise will have to be reached soon because wars only end when one side is defeated, which is highly unlikely to happen in this war, or when both sides agree to terms. Though some may argue that Putin should learn the wisdom of compromise, since it is better to bend a little than to break, even if doing so would be seen as a failure by others. That, however, may only be a temporary solution for the war-weary West. But would this decision discourage Putin from further expansion, and how would a compromise affect China's decision-making process in regards to Taiwan? Compromise makes a good umbrella but a poor roof, as James Russell Lowell once said.